There's a specific kind of woman who never made you beg for her attention. She never played games with her warmth, she didn't ration her kindness or hold your past against you like ammunition. She just gave. Quietly, consistently, and almost automatically. The way the sun doesn't negotiate about whether to rise. And you got used to that. You got used to it so completely that you stopped noticing it was even happening. That is the most dangerous thing a person can do. Because right now, somewhere in your life, there is a woman who has been doing math she never signed up to do. She's been tallying every time she put your mood above her own peace. Every dinner she sat through while carrying something heavy that you never thought to ask about. Every 3 a.m. thought she swallowed so she wouldn't burden you. Every version of herself she quietly filed away to make more room for the version of you that you were comfortable being. And here's the thing nobody tells you until it's already too late, that math has a limit. There's a number she reaches, and when she reaches it, something happens inside her that is almost impossible to explain and completely impossible to undo. She doesn't explode, she doesn't issue a warning, she doesn't send you a list of grievances formatted like an itemized invoice for all the ways you came up short. She just becomes unavailable. Not physically, right there, same face, same voice. But whoever used to live behind those eyes, the version of her that held the door open for you inside her heart, she's already packed and left the building, and you won't realize it happened until you knock on a door that no longer leads anywhere. I want to talk about who this woman actually is because most people fundamentally misread her. They see her patience and call it passivity. They see her forgiveness and call it desperation. They look at her willingness to absorb pain and assume there's no limit to the supply. But that's not kindness they're watching. What they're watching is one of the most psychologically sophisticated operations a human being can run. An empathic woman is not simply someone who is nice. She is someone whose nervous system is calibrated differently from most people around her. She is, in clinical terms, a highly sensitive person, and that is not a weakness. Her brain's mirror neuron system fires with an intensity that makes her feel other people's emotional states almost as if they were her own. When you were stressed, she felt it in her chest before you even opened your mouth. When you were ashamed, she quietly repositioned herself in the room so you wouldn't feel exposed. When you were hollow, she showed up with something, not because someone told her to, but because she could not turn off the radar that told her you needed it. You were never just dealing with a woman. You were dealing with a woman whose entire system was oriented toward you. And that system ran 24 hours a day, every day, without breaks, without refueling, without anyone pointing the same awareness back at her. Here is the part that breaks people when they finally understand it. She wasn't giving from overflow. She was giving from reserves. There is a profound difference between those two things. Overflow is what happens when a person has so much of something, joy, security, love, that it naturally spills out. Reserves are what you draw from when the overflow is gone. She ran out of overflow a long time before you noticed anything was different. By the time the silence started, she wasn't even drawing from reserves anymore. She was scraping the bottom of something that had been empty for months. Psychologists call this compassion fatigue. It's the same phenomenon documented in emergency room nurses, trauma therapists, and frontline crisis workers. The specific damage that comes from extended, one-directional caregiving without reciprocity. It is not a personality flaw. It is a physiological and psychological response to a system that has been running on empty for too long. The body starts to protect itself. The brain starts to disengage. The nervous system, which had been holding the door open for you for years, quietly locks it from the inside. And she can't always explain why it happened. That is the part that will haunt you. Because she may not even know how to put it into words. All she knows is that something shifted, like a gear that slipped, and now the warmth she used to feel toward you has been replaced by something flat. Not hatred, not even anger, something worse. Indifference. And indifference in someone who used to love you with everything she had is the loneliest place in the world to stand. I want you to stop right now. I want you to think about the woman in your life, or the woman who used to be in your life, and ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time you asked her how she was doing and waited more than 10 seconds for the answer? When was the last time you noticed she was carrying something and you reached for it before she had to ask? When was the last time you looked at her, really looked at her, not as a function of your daily life, but as a human being with a full interior world that exists completely independent of your needs. If that question makes you uncomfortable, pay attention to that discomfort. It is trying to tell you something. Because here is what she was living while you were somewhere else. She was the person who tracked everything. Not because she was anxious or controlling, but because her nervous system wouldn't let her not track it. She knew when you were pulling away before you consciously knew it yourself. She knew when something was wrong at work from the way you held your jaw. She knew which conversations to avoid when your energy was low and which ones you needed even when you didn't ask for them. She was running an intelligence operation on your behalf, an exhaustive, continuous reading of you, and she was doing it while simultaneously managing her own life, her own fears, her own grief, her own hunger for exactly the kind of attention she was giving you. She never asked for the same level of effort back. She would have settled for a fraction. She would have settled for someone who occasionally looked up from their own world long enough to see her standing in it. But nobody looked up, or not enough, or not in the right way. And so she kept going. Because that is what this kind of woman does. She tells herself it will get better. She tells herself you're going through something. She tells herself that love means showing up even when it's hard. And she believes that with every cell in her body. And she is right. Except she forgot to apply that standard to herself. She forgot that love also means someone shows up for you. And the moment she finally remembers that, truly remembers it, is the moment everything changes. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine. After enough time, enough data, enough repeated experiences, the brain draws a conclusion. It files that conclusion deep in the limbic system, below the reach of logical argument or romantic pleading, and it quietly updates its threat assessment. And what the brain of an exhausted, depleted, empathic woman concludes, after years of giving without receiving, is this: this relationship is not safe for me. Not dangerous in the way we usually use that word, safe in the deeper sense, the kind of safety where you can exist fully, be seen completely, and not have to protect yourself from the person who is supposed to love you. Her nervous system concludes that full emotional expression in this space is a liability. And when the nervous system concludes something is a liability, it does what it always does. It stops. This is not a choice she makes on a Tuesday afternoon. It is not a decision she arrives at after writing in a journal. It is a biological response to a prolonged state of threat. Her attachment system, the same system that made her reach for you in the first place, recalibrates. What was once a secure drive toward connection becomes a protective drive toward distance. She doesn't become cold, she becomes armored. And the difference matters because cold is something that can be warmed. Armor is something that was built for a reason, and it doesn't come off just because you've decided to apologize. There is a stage in this process that most people miss entirely. It happens before she goes quiet, before the distance you can feel. There is a phase where she actually tried harder. There is a phase where, sensing the widening gap, she turned up the volume on everything she was already doing. She cooked more, gave more, reached more, initiated more. She did not scale back her investment in you when it wasn't being returned. She doubled it. Because that is the psychology of the empathic woman in the early stages of depletion. She believes the problem is that she isn't doing enough. She believes if she just finds the right angle, the right gesture, the right moment of connection, the reciprocity she's starving for will finally come. It's a pattern behavioral psychologists recognize as the intermittent reinforcement trap. You gave her just enough, just inconsistently enough, that her brain kept chasing the next hit of connection, the same way a gambler keeps feeding a machine that occasionally pays out. She wasn't weak, she was operating exactly the way a human brain operates when it's been conditioned by unpredictable reward patterns. You can't blame her for trying harder, the architecture of the brain demands it. But here's what happens on the other side of that trying harder phase. Eventually the reinforcement cycle breaks down. Eventually the brain runs the numbers and accepts what the heart has been refusing to. The machine is not going to pay out. And at that moment, the trying stops. Not gradually, not with warning. It stops the way a tide stops before it turns. One final stillness, and then a total reversal of direction. And that reversal looks from the outside like she gave up. It is not giving up. It is the bravest and most expensive thing she has ever done. When she stops trying to reach you, she starts, for the first time in as long as she can remember, reaching for herself. And what she finds there is both devastating and liberating. She finds someone she has neglected as thoroughly as you neglected her. She finds a woman who has wants she never gave herself permission to voice, opinions she softened to make you comfortable, dreams she filed under someday while she made your present more livable. She finds the graveyard of all the things she set aside, and she has to grieve them. This is real grief. I don't want you to make the mistake of thinking it's drama or manipulation or a phase she'll come out of once she feels heard. This is the specific kind of grief that comes from looking honestly at what you gave away and accepting you can't get those years back. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss, the mourning of something that didn't die in one clear moment, but eroded quietly over a long time.
It is harder to grieve than sudden loss because there is no single moment to point to. There is only the long, slow accumulation of small losses that each seems survivable on their own. She is grieving the woman she was before she made you her whole project. She is grieving the relationship she believed she was building and the future she was building it toward. She is not grieving you specifically. She is grieving the idea of you, the potential she saw and poured herself into, which is a crueler grief than the reality would have been, because potential is infinite and reality has limits. But here is where the story turns. Because grief, when you let it move through you instead of running from it, does not leave you empty, it leaves you clarified. She comes out of this grief knowing things she could not have known before. She knows at a cellular level what she will not accept again. Not in a bitter or defensive way. There's an important distinction here. Bitterness is when you let the wound define your future. Clarity is when you let the wound teach your future. She has clarity. She knows the difference between a person who is going through something and a person who is using going through something as a permanent exemption from showing up. She knows the difference between a moment of emotional unavailability and a pattern of it. She knows the difference between someone who loves her imperfectly and someone who doesn't actually see her at all. She cannot be convinced out of this knowing. That is the thing you need to understand if you are the person standing at the door she's closed. You cannot argue her back. You cannot present a case that is emotionally compelling enough to override what her own nervous system lived through. You cannot apologize strategically enough to undo the recalibration, because the recalibration didn't happen in her mind. It happened in her body. It happened below the language centers. It lives somewhere that words don't reach. If you are that person, if you are standing in the wreckage and only now feeling the full weight of what happened, I need you to do something that is going to feel deeply counterintuitive. Stop focusing on her. Stop strategizing about how to get her back. Stop analyzing what you could say or do that might crack the door open. Because as long as you're trying to get something back, you're still in the same mode that created the problem in the first place. You're still making her existence about what she can give you or what you can get from her. Even your remorse right now is still centered on yourself. The only growth that is actually worth anything is the growth that happens with no audience. The work you do when there's no chance she'll ever see it and come back. The accountability you take when there's nothing to gain from taking it. That is the kind of change that actually changes something. And even then, even if you do that work, even if you become the person she needed, she may not come back. And that is not a punishment. That is a natural consequence of the timeline you chose. You cannot reclaim time you spent absent. You can only choose what you do with the time you have now. Now I want to speak directly to the woman who is somewhere inside this process right now. Maybe you're in the early stages, where the exhaustion has started, but the guilt about feeling it is louder than the exhaustion itself. Maybe you're in the middle of it, where the distance is there, but you're still second-guessing yourself and wondering if you're being too much or asking for too much, or if the problem is somehow still you. Maybe you've already turned the corner and you're on the other side, quieter, lighter, but not sure yet what to do with the space. Wherever you are, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not difficult. You are not cold.
You are not dramatic or oversensitive or a burden to the people around you. You are a person who gave more than most people ever give, for longer than most people could sustain it, to someone who was not tracking what it cost you. The fact that you're exhausted is not a character flaw. It is evidence of how hard you tried. The guilt you feel about pulling back is one of the cruelest tricks the mind plays on the people who care the most. It convinces you that your needs are an imposition. It convinces you that wanting reciprocity is somehow greedy. It convinces you that a good woman absorbs the imbalance and stays soft through it and doesn't make things complicated by having edges. That is a lie. A specific, culturally reinforced lie that was designed, consciously or not, to keep you available and pliable and easy to rely on. And you believed it, because believing it felt like love. It felt like what love is supposed to look like. But love is not self-erasure. It never was. The shift that is happening in you right now, the one that feels like you're becoming someone you don't entirely recognize, is not damage. It is not the loss of who you are. It is the return of who you are. It is the woman you were before you learned to shrink herself, before you learned to monitor the room for other people's emotional weather, before you learned that your peace was negotiable and other people's comfort was not. She has always been in there. She was just buried under years of being told, explicitly or implicitly, that she was too much. She wasn't too much. She was exactly enough. And what she needed was to be met with equivalent energy, not managed down to a more convenient size. The process of reclaiming yourself is not linear. It is going to feel at points like grief. It is going to feel like anger. It is going to feel like a wild, disorienting kind of freedom that doesn't know what to do with itself yet. There will be moments where you question the whole thing and wonder if you made a mistake and if you were too hasty or too harsh. That is normal. That is not a sign to go back. That is a sign that you are human and that nothing real is simple. But underneath all of that, if you go still enough to hear it, there is something else. A quiet. Not an empty quiet, a full one. The kind that exists when you are no longer performing for an audience that doesn't appreciate the performance. The kind that exists when you are finally allowed to take up the space your whole life has been trying to give you. Stay in that quiet. Let it get comfortable. It is not loneliness, even when it feels like it. It is solitude. And solitude, for a woman who has never had a moment that wasn't spoken for by someone else's needs, is not emptiness. It is the beginning of everything. What does she look like now, this woman on the other side of all of it? She looks like someone who moves differently. Not colder, not harder, more settled, more rooted. As if she has found a center of gravity inside herself that she can organize her life around, instead of organizing her life around the shifting moods and needs of someone else. She makes decisions faster, not because she has become callous, but because she is no longer running every choice through the filter of how it will land for someone else. She has opinions she doesn't soften, standards she doesn't apologize for, boundaries she holds not with aggression, but with the quiet certainty of someone who has learned, through fire, what happens when she doesn't. She is still warm. That is the part that surprises people. They expected armor and found a garden. But it is a garden with a gate now, and the gate has a lock, and she is the only one who decides who gets a key. She is still capable of deep, extraordinary love. Her capacity for it has not diminished. If anything, the opposite is true. Because she is no longer giving it away to preserve a dynamic that didn't deserve it, she has more of it than ever. She gives it now from surplus, from a place of genuine choice, to people who have shown her, through consistent action over time, that they can receive it without wasting it. And she is not waiting for the person who missed her. She is not sitting by the door hoping the lesson finally landed. She is out in her own life, building it, filling it, expanding into it the way something expands when pressure is finally removed. She is not available to be the backup plan for someone who is only now realizing what they had.
She is not a reset button. She is not a vending machine that dispenses second chances when the right amount of guilt is inserted. She knows her own value now, not abstractly, not as something she was told, but in the bone-deep, lived experience way that cannot be borrowed or performed. She earned that knowledge.
She paid for it in years of giving, in sleepless nights, in all the small moments of quiet self-sacrifice that nobody saw and nobody named and that she herself barely acknowledged at the time. She paid for it. And she gets to keep it. The world does not quite know what to do with her now. The people who depended on her infinite give are unsettled. The ones who were comfortable with her smallness are uncomfortable with her fullness. She will be called changed. She will be called difficult. She will be called selfish by people who define selfishness as any moment when her energy is directed toward herself. She will let those people believe what they need to believe, because she no longer needs to be understood by everyone. She only needs to be understood by herself, and she is. If you have been watching her from a distance, watching the transformation and trying to understand it, here is what I want you to take with you. This was not about you failing to be perfect. It was not about impossible standards or unrealistic expectations. It was about the most basic human equation. You need to give what you take. Not equally, not timed to the minute, but proportionally, genuinely, with awareness that the other person's tank is finite and your responsibility in the relationship includes keeping an eye on it. The woman who led with her heart did not become this different person because she stopped loving. She became this person because she started, for the first time, living. And there is nothing you can do to stop that. The only question that matters is what you do next. Do you keep being the kind of person who only notices the well when it runs dry? Or do you become the kind of person who fills it before it gets there? That is not a question I can answer for you, but it is the only question worth asking. Because the next woman who opens her heart to you is watching how you answer it, even if she doesn't know she is, even if you don't.